In September 2025, Nepal, a nation renowned for its breathtaking Himalayan peaks and rich cultural heritage, was thrust into the global spotlight for a very different reason. A youth-led uprising, fueled by frustration and hope for change, swept through the streets of Kathmandu and beyond, toppling the government and sending shockwaves around the world. What began as peaceful demonstrations organized by Gen Z activists quickly spiraled out of control. The Parliament and Supreme Court, long-standing symbols of authority, were engulfed in flames as protesters vented their anger at a system they saw as corrupt, unresponsive, and hopelessly out of touch with the needs of ordinary citizens. The sheer scale and intensity of the protests were unlike anything Nepal had ever witnessed. Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli's government, already weakened by years of political infighting and public distrust, was unable to withstand the pressure. Within days, the administration collapsed, plunging the country into a period of deep uncertainty and anxiety. In the aftermath, authorities responded with a heavy hand. Mass arrests swept through the capital as police rounded up hundreds of young protesters. The newly formed interim government struggled to restore order, facing resistance from a population that had lost faith in traditional leadership. More than 400 people have been detained so far, many of them young activists. They now face a range of serious charges, from vandalism and arson to murder, as the state attempts to reassert control and send a message to would-be dissenters. The world's attention is now fixed on Nepal, which has become a case study in the power of digital age youth movements. Social media played a crucial role, allowing activists to organize, share information, and broadcast their struggle to a global audience in real time. The situation on the ground remains volatile. Streets are scarred by clashes, and the air is thick with uncertainty. Deep wounds, both physical and emotional, have yet to heal, and the nation faces difficult questions about its future direction. Nepal's Gen Z uprising stands as a stark warning to leaders everywhere. When a generation's frustrations are ignored for too long, the consequences can be explosive, reshaping a nation's destiny in a matter of days. The spark? A government ban on social media. On September 8, 2025, Nepal blocked TikTok, Facebook, and X, claiming to fight misinformation. But for Gen Z, it was an attack on their freedom. These platforms were their lifeline for expression, community, and activism. The ban unified the youth, who quickly bypassed restrictions using VPNs and alternative apps. Hashtags calling for protests went viral, and plans for mass demonstrations took shape. The government's move backfired, turning a generation's frustration into a powerful movement. The fight for internet freedom became a fight for their future. The digital world and real world merged, and the youth refused to be silenced. The ban didn't just anger them, it mobilized them like never before. The stage was set for explosive change. The social media ban was just the trigger, a spark that ignited deep frustrations simmering beneath the surface of Nepali society. For years, ordinary Nepalis had endured economic hardship and rampant corruption, watching their hopes for a better life slowly erode. Young people especially faced a bleak reality: high unemployment, low wages, and a government that seemed more interested in its own survival than in the future of its youth. With few opportunities at home, many were forced to leave their families behind and seek work abroad, often in grueling and unsafe conditions. Meanwhile, those who stayed saw public resources siphoned off by the powerful, leaving communities underdeveloped and dreams unfulfilled. Online platforms became a lifeline, a place where young Nepalis could expose corruption, share their stories, and demand accountability. Viral posts and videos made it impossible for the authorities to hide the rot in the system. Their anger was about more than just personal hardship. It was about a deep sense of betrayal, a loss of faith in leaders who were supposed to protect and serve the people. The protests quickly grew into a powerful movement, with thousands demanding economic justice, honest leadership, and a government that truly listened. Gen Z wanted more than just jobs. They wanted opportunities to build a future in their own country, to contribute and thrive without having to leave home. The glaring contrast between the lavish lifestyles of politicians and the daily struggles of ordinary youth only deepened the divide, fueling a powerful sense of us versus them. So when the government moved to silence their voices by banning social media, it was the final straw. The nation was already on edge, and the ban pushed it over. The result was a volatile mix of anger and hope that exploded into nationwide unrest as a new generation demanded change and refused to be silenced. The first protests on September 8th were peaceful. Thousands gathered in Kathmandu's streets, their voices rising in unison as they chanted slogans and mocked politicians with satirical street theater. The atmosphere was charged with hope and determination, but there was also a sense of restraint, a belief that change could be achieved without violence. Organizers took to megaphones, urging everyone to remain nonviolent. Their goal was clear: to pressure the government into lifting the social media ban that had stifled communication and free expression. They believed that peaceful resistance would win public sympathy and force the authorities to listen. But as the days passed and the crowd swelled, the mood shifted. The demands grew bolder, no longer just about internet freedom, but about government accountability. Calls for the Prime Minister's resignation echoed through Kathmandu, and the sense of urgency intensified. The government's response was swift and harsh. Police deployed tear gas and charged the crowds with batons, shattering the fragile trust between citizens and the state. The air filled with smoke and confusion, and the peaceful protest began to unravel. Skirmishes erupted on the streets. Protesters, once committed to nonviolence, now found themselves in direct confrontation with riot police. The demonstration quickly turned violent, with objects hurled and barricades erected. News of the crackdown spread rapidly, igniting anger in other cities. Soon, protests erupted across Nepal, with crowds gathering in urban centers and rural towns alike. The unrest was no longer confined to Kathmandu. It had become a nationwide movement. Protesters, fueled by outrage, began targeting symbols of state power. Parliament, the Supreme Court, police stations, and even politicians' homes were set ablaze, their flames lighting up the night sky and signaling a dramatic escalation. As chaos reigned, government officials fled their posts. The streets became lawless, with crowds running through the night, and the government's grip on power slipping away with every passing hour. Law and order broke down completely. Shops were looted, businesses ransacked, and once busy marketplaces became scenes of destruction. The sense of security that citizens once felt had vanished. In the chaos, some protesters stormed police armories, seizing rifles and ammunition. The sight of armed demonstrators deepened the sense of anarchy and fear, as the uprising took on a new and dangerous dimension. Within days, the youth-led movement had overwhelmed the state. Government buildings were occupied, and the old order seemed powerless to respond. The energy and determination of Nepal's young people had brought the state to its knees. The government collapsed, leaving behind empty offices and abandoned chambers. On the streets, citizens reacted with disbelief and uncertainty, struggling to comprehend the scale of the upheaval and the power vacuum that now existed. The uprising had evolved far beyond its original cause. What began as a fight for internet freedom had become a full-blown insurrection, marked by burning barricades, street battles, and widespread disorder. Nepal's political order had been upended by its youngest citizens. Youth leaders, once dismissed by the establishment, now stood atop government buildings, waving flags and addressing massive crowds with a new sense of purpose. The world watched in astonishment as Nepal entered a new era, one born from chaos, driven by the passion and resolve of a generation determined to shape their country's future. The violence left deep scars. At least 76 people died, most of them young protesters. Their deaths became symbols of the government's brutal crackdown, fueling demands for justice. Police officers and escaped prisoners were also among the dead, highlighting the chaos. Over 2,700 structures were attacked, including parliament, courts, police stations, and political offices. Businesses were looted, politicians' homes targeted, and essential public services disrupted. The economic cost is staggering, with job losses and shattered investor confidence. The destruction of records and infrastructure will take years to repair. The violence deepened social divisions and left a legacy of mistrust. Nepal faces a long road to recovery, physically, economically, and emotionally. The new government must confront not just rebuilding, but healing a fractured society. The scars of September will not fade quickly. Amid the chaos, Nepal's prison system collapsed. Protesters attacked prisons, leading to a mass escape of 14,500 detainees, one of the largest in recent history. Most escapees were convicted criminals, adding a new layer of fear to an already unstable society. The interim government launched a nationwide manhunt, but over 5,000 remain at large. The mass escape exposed deep flaws in prison security and infrastructure. The crisis has forced urgent calls for reform and left public safety in jeopardy. The presence of thousands of fugitives is a constant reminder of the state's collapse. With the government toppled, Nepal needed a leader, and Gen Z found one online. Activists used Discord to nominate Sushila Karki, a respected former Chief Justice known for her integrity. Her selection, driven by online polls and discussions, was a bold move for stability and reform. Karki was appointed interim prime minister, tasked with restoring order and preparing for new elections in March 2026. Her leadership is seen as a bridge between the old and new Nepal. The digital selection process showed the power of networked youth to shape the nation's future. Hope and cautious optimism now rest on her shoulders. The new government's focus: justice and security. Over 400 people have been arrested for the violence, facing charges from murder to weapons possession. A special commission is investigating the government's crackdown and the unrest. Travel bans have been imposed on former leaders, signaling a push for accountability. The hunt for 5,000 escaped prisoners continues, with police raids and checkpoints nationwide. Gen Z activists now demand more, calling for the resignation of the new Home Minister over the protest deaths. The interim government must balance restoring order with meeting demands for justice. Nepal's stability depends on navigating these competing pressures. Nepal stands at a crossroads, its future uncertain. The interim government must manage crises and guide the country to elections in 2026. The challenge: can Gen Z's energy translate into lasting political change? Nepal's uprising is a warning to governments everywhere: ignore youth at your peril. In the digital age, power lives not just in parliaments, but in the hands of connected citizens. A generation with nothing to lose will demand to be heard. The world is watching to see if Nepal can build a more inclusive democracy, or become a cautionary tale. The next chapter is yet to be written.